Well, hello everyone, and again, thank you so much for coming. My name is Srđan Kutrešan, and this is the second time that I'm hosting a Waves-related meetup. Very excited about that. For those who haven't been here before or at our previous meetup or any of the Vienna Futurists meetups, just a brief introduction. I'm originally from Croatia. I've been living here for 11 years now. My background is investment banking and management advisory, and I've done actually a ton of different things. And I've always been a geek at heart. I wasn't very good at maths in school, which is why I never studied anything tech related. Then I went into investment banking, and a couple of years later the world collapsed in 2008. Maybe that has something to do with my not being very good at math. I don't know. Now I'm here to spectacularly contribute to the development of blockchain, hopefully better than what we had earlier. Joking aside, I've really been close to and around cryptocurrencies for a long time. Since 2010, I was mining Bitcoin in 2010 and mining Ether since then, and just involved in a couple of other things. And actually, my goal last year was to develop services on the Ethereum platform. And then one of my friends told me about Waves. At first, I wasn't even too interested, to be honest. But then I realized that it's actually technologically extremely advanced. It is, as far as I can tell, the fastest blockchain around. On testnet, people have achieved around 1,000 transactions per second, and on mainnet, the most transactions achieved in 1 second so far has been around 430 something. But that's not a technological limitation. It's rather that there just isn't enough demand for more transactions in 1 second. Anyway, 430 something compares to about 7 transactions per second on Ethereum network. So it's leaps and bounds faster. Another amazing thing about Waves is the ease of token creation. So you can literally launch a coin on Waves platform within a minute. It costs at the moment around €5 to create your coin. And the moment you create it, it's immediately available on the exchange. It's the Waves decentralized exchange, which is built into the wallet or the client. And you can start trading immediately. So it's a very impressive platform with actually also a very cool roadmap. So smart contracts are around the corner. Multi-signature accounts and so on and so forth. I don't want to bore you too much with feature descriptions. That was we've done that last time. And today we will be talking about ICOs. So on Waves platform there is well over 10,000 coins already created. I've created a few, and most of those coins have been created. Well, actually, most of them have been created for fun, just to see what it's like to create a token on a blockchain. Some of them are created for actual business use cases. And a lot of the people creating coins don't really have experience or knowledge on how to do an initial coin offering or an ICO properly, so that it's legally sound, that the tax situation is clear, so to say, that you won't end up with a huge pile of debt as a token creator and issuer, or even, commit some kind of financial fraud, end up maybe in prison or something like that. So we have an amazing panel of experts here with us tonight. My good friend since quite a few years, Dušica, is here. She has years of experience in banking and arranging financing, also corporate finance, or primarily corporate finance. You will tell Dušica a bit more about that. and she has been for a while now working as an ICO advisor. She will take us through the process of how to properly prepare, execute an ICO, including the post-ICO steps. And we have Oliver and Brian from Stadler Völker legal office. Sorry for that. As you are probably aware, I'm quite nervous and have been working day and night for days, so I'm amazed that I'm even able to speak. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. They will be talking about the legal environment for ICOs in Austria, in the EU, and in the US. And I would actually like to say a few words before that about a project that I started 2 months ago, which is Vienna Node. So Waves is a proof of stake blockchain. Unlike Bitcoin and Ethereum, there is no highly complex mathematical equations that your super high-end dedicated hardware needs to solve in order to secure the blockchain. It's actually very resource light, so eco-friendly even. That's actually not one of Wave's promotional messages, but I think it should be, that it's an eco-friendly blockchain. And it works on this system of nodes where all holders of the Waves token can lease their Waves to a node. This node, or all of them, process transactions on the Waves platform. They get rewarded with transaction fees for processing transactions, and they share these transaction fee rewards with the people who have leased their Waves to the node. So 2 months ago, I decided to set up one of these nodes. It's well, actually, I wanted to support business creation on the Waves blockchain here in Austria and surrounding countries. So I called the node Vienna node. I started with 1,000 Waves, which is technically the minimum you need to start a node with. And 2 months later, as you can see here, we now have 74,500 Waves leased to Vienna node, which is great. I'm very happy about that, and grateful to all of those, or all of you who are leasing to Vienna node. The goal is, of course, much, much more than that. By the end of the week, if we could push this to 100,000, I would be super excited. And in a couple of months, let's have 1 million nodes, 1 million Waves on the Vienna node, so that we can actually provide meaningful service in securing the network, processing transactions, and providing services on top of the node. So my mission is to support actually, I call it blockchain for the real world, rather than people who just want to speculate with the value of coins and do instant trading and talk about when Moon and when Lambo. My goal is really to support real world projects, and I'm so happy to introduce only a couple of them to you. I'll start with Organic Token. Big shout out to Organic Token guys. I think they're over there in the interwebs. And it's a token created, as it says here, with lifestyle marketplace in mind, basically supporting organic bio holistic lifestyles, not only in terms of organic food, but also or just earth-friendly way of living. And they are creating a marketplace supporting local producers around the world. It's just one of the projects that's dear to me. Another one is Coffee Coin. These guys have really done a great thing already, and they're developing very fast. With Coffee Coin, you can actually buy locally sourced, fair fairly produced coffee from various countries around the world, and they've even built in functionality for orders, order transaction, order tracking, and shipment tracking and stuff like that using Waves blockchain. And there's a third one, legal things. It's a project from the Netherlands. I met them, actually I was in Moscow a couple of weeks ago at the birthday party of the Waves platform. They were celebrating 2 years. And I met guys behind legal things. It's a very impressive project in the Netherlands, even though it's one of the highly advanced countries in the world. A lot of administrative things are still done on paper and even manually, and even buying shares in companies, if I understood it correctly, involves a lot of paperwork. So what legal things have already started doing is providing services to the Dutch administration, various ministries and state bodies in digitizing these services on top of Waves blockchain. Another thing that I would like to briefly introduce is actually as part of the Waves of the Vienna node offering. One of the things we're doing is customizing the Waves wallet, and you've probably seen, if you have been following Waves, you've probably seen a wallet that looks like this in quite a few projects which have their own custom wallets. So you just give it some name and then some password. I hope this will be accepted. I don't need to save. 2-week password. Okay, let's add some numbers. Let's see now. Still 2-week. Okay, there's lots of security on the Waves wallet. Okay, I'm actually ready to give up on this. But the reason why I'm ready to give up is that even though most, to the best of my understanding, all of the projects which have customized their wallet on the Waves platform so far use this interface, which is basically ancient history. So what we have done is something much nicer. I'm super happy to introduce this. This is the new wallet, well, incomparably more modern than the other one. This is a test. This is a test wallet that you can access from your PC or your cell phone. Even right now, it's available at wallet.vienna-node.eu, so you can try it out. But this is still test, so do not put a lot of money on this. You can use it just to play around. Why this is important? Because in order to process any transactions on the Waves network, you need to have Waves in your wallet. All transactions cost a certain number of Waves. It roughly translates to about 5 cents per transaction, so they're extremely cheap. However, if you are a company who want to provide products or services to their customers and you want to have your own token, let's call it company token, you don't necessarily want your customers to have Waves in their wallet in order to transact with your company token. So what we have done here is create a wallet that processes transactions using vNode coin, which is a coin Vienna node has created. So if you go to send and then clever me, I forgot to write a Waves address for myself. But in any case, as you can see down here, the transaction fee will be charged in vNode coin rather than in Waves. And we can do that for any company. So if you want to set up der Brutkasten coin, we can enable you to process transactions using that coin as well. just to show you around a little bit, this is the decentralized exchange. You can buy, sell more than 10,000 various coins, but I don't want to use up too much of your time, and I'd like to give the floor over to our first speaker for tonight, Dušica. Let me just open her presentation. And this is the one. Shall we try with the PowerPoint one? Be brave. I use Linux on my laptop, so we'll see how it works. If you don't like it, we can switch to PDF. If you don't like how it looks, we can switch to PDF. You have it here.
Hi. First, thank you everyone for coming. I think it's really amazing that you came today. As I said, it's an amazingly beautiful day in Vienna, so I really, really appreciate you being here today. I'm going to be as fast as possible because you want to go out, and I can understand that. So I start like, what is an ICO? I mean, you all know what's coin, what's token. Everyone's talking about the ICO or ITO, which means like initial coin or initial token offering. I would say that initial coin or token offering is like a means of how funds are raised for the new blockchain, mostly blockchain ventures, but it will not be only for blockchain very soon. And it was inspired by IPO or initial public offering. Everyone asks me very often, well, what's the major difference? You know, apart from the fact that IPOs are usually done when the company is much more mature, the major really difference is that in the IPO, the investor technically buys the ownership of the operating company, while basically operating company is delegated how to do the products and services, etc. While in the ICO, the ownership is of the certain percentage of functional utilities or proprietary money supply, meaning the investors do not invest in the company, they invest directly in product and services. That is the major difference. And it is really, in the world of finance, breakthrough. It has been done before. I will not lie to you. I mean, you could basically buy and sell brands and products, etc. But the way how it is done now, it's available to everyone. This is democratization, which basically brought a possibility to every single person on the planet to invest directly in product and services they trust into. Most common types of funding, which we are looking at, is the traditional VC funding. You've been there, alphabet funding, seed, series A, B, C, etc. Hybrid funding, which is kind of a new thing, which means the company that already raised seed or series A going for ICO, and then of course the pure ICO funding. The advantages, pluses and minuses are there for every option. However, I will focus on hybrid financing, hybrid funding, because this is pretty new thing, and it is a trend of 2018. This is the moment when you basically can get smart money plus crowdfunding. In VC, you had a very slow growth. You had to listen to what VC tells you. Lots of startups were burned with it. In ICO, pure ICO, you basically get a lot of money, but you don't get a lot of support. So hybrid model is doing this so-called combination of smart money and crowdfunding. So hence the rise of hybrid funding models. 2018, we have seen the rise of non-fungible tokens. We can talk later in Q&A session if you want to know what it is. The difference between fungible and non-fungible is very clear. In fungible, like ERC-20, everyone is identical. In non-fungible tokens, they're very unique, everyone. So we finally came to the moment in history when we can transfer the real-world assets in a token, because every non-fungible token is unique. So that's the reason why it's exploding. The increase of private sales. I even heard the number that in 2018, approximately 84% of funds were raised through private sales. I'll tell you another number. In 2017, through 435 projects, $5.6 billion were raised. In only first quarter of 2018, in 118 projects, including Telegram, $6.3 billion were raised. So only in first quarter, we are ahead of 2017, which was like a year where everything exploded. And I can tell you a few more data. This is like approximately 2 million people are now participating in ICO scene. 81% of ICOs raised successfully funding. And as I say, in 2018, approximately 84% of raised 6.3 billion comes through private sale, which includes institutional investors, and that's why we believe the growth happened, and also non-institutional investors, which are already in spades, which we call them like whales. I would say that another big thing is rise of security token. That's what we all expect. It's happening. It's still not traded, but it is coming. Gibraltar Stock Exchange opened Gibraltar Exchange for security tokens. I just met them in London. It is happening. It's not the only one, but we are seeing this is the moment where the real world exchanges will merge with the cryptocurrency world. Tokenization of the business model. This is the thing that Srdjan was talking about, particularly coffee model. This is typical example of the tokenized economy or tokenized business model. We will be seeing more and more of that. Also the increasing attention of the regulators. I will leave that to our gentlemen from the legal side. I have had the advantage of listening to them already, so I know you're going to gather lots of good information. I would say balkanization of regulation already started, and of course we've seen lots of bans. So I will now just quickly run through step-by-step guide. The only token that matters is the one being actually used. Keep that all the time in mind. Just don't do it because you can. And that is what lots of people are doing out there. I've chosen this photo because it's not straight road ahead. Every ICO is different. It's not an easy story. If you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. I've worked with lots of them. I'm working with more of them. I usually take 3 ICOs at the same time. Every single one is different. So pre-planning. Quickly ask all the difficult questions. Why should my business be on blockchain? Why blockchain? This is one of the most important things you should answer in pre-planning phase. If that is something you passed your test, you know why you're doing it, why is that good for you, for others, why people will use your token, etc. Then you basically go into building up the team, network of advisors, and drafting the first documentation, that specifically technical one, which will grow into your white paper. Planning phase, still we are not out, still no one knows, still we are not calling the broadcast and saying like, Dan, I have ICO coming out. It's still planning phase. You have really to do the tokenomics right. You have to define all the ICO features. You have to know exactly how much you want to raise and why in private, public. You also have to have a very elaborate white paper done because this is the core of your business model in future, and you will be seeding lots of ideas from this document into light paper, one-pagers, interviews, and building up around them. Things are all the time developing. I've seen people changing white papers during the ICO, which is not forbidden at all. You just have to explain why, how your idea evolved, what inspired you, and why you're doing it. Also, this is the moment when you really should do the full legal and tax analysis. It's still planning phase. I really have to say lots of times that. All the analysis done, marketing, financial, you know where you're heading. Eliminate all the risks, and then of course you have to work with the guys like Srdjan and the Waves, with Vienna node, because you really have also to know who is going to issue your token, how much it will cost. You have to buffer the volatility of the market. It's really not that easy as it sounds, but it's fun. I can tell you that. I always mention this in planning phase. One day you will wake up, and from 3 guys sitting in a local pub and having an idea, you will be having a company of 20, 30 people and $20, $30 million in your account, and a couple of thousands or 10,000 investors at your hat. And you will have every single regulator asking you questions, etc. So there is a hangover after post-ICO. You know, like one day you wake up. In order to make your life easier, I suggest that you consider also your liquidity plans, your liquidity department, fiscal monetary policy in planning phase, and also including the exchange listing and every detail you can come, you know, like across at this stage. The more homework you do, the easier your life will be later on. And plan people who will be doing that. Get them involved at the early stage, get them follow up. Pre-ICO, finally we came to pre-ICO. We can say people now we are in pre-ICO. We now have a private sale, we have also public sale coming. The lawyers have done the work, we trust them, soft is there, we are contacting the investors, people are bringing money. Probably you will need seed funding to pay for all the marketing and the other stuff. So this is actually also, you have to be clear who can invest, who cannot invest. This is commonly US, Chinese and Taiwanese nationalities that have difficulties with direct investment, but it's not impossible. ICO starts, ta-da. We are now like 6 to 8 months down the road, even longer. We have 20 people working approximately, and now we have to inform people what to do if they want to participate in our ICO. We have to go to have very clear tutorial videos and the blogs. We have to have instant communication. We have to share with the people all the time what's happening. We already forming the whitelists. It's expanding on daily basis. Not even everyone who is whitelisted will invest. People give up, but you have to push for it. You also have to do anti-money laundering checkups. This I highly recommend. Clear communication on every possible thing, and try to keep your order book in order. Everyone asks me what order book is. This is your investors. You can also in private sale and public sale, you can put them all together in the order book. At one point, you might be asked by some regulator in future about it, and you should be prepared. Well, now we have 20, 30 million in our bank, and now we wake up, and what we should do. First, inform your community. Keep your community, keep your investors as close to you as possible. Inform them about every single step you do. You should do audit report, you should release it to them, you should basically have end of sale report, you should release it to your investors, you should finalize the order book, and you should definitely communicate where are the tokens, and also what exchange you are looking at, if you're already looking at it. If not, you can clearly communicate when you will be looking. The clearer communication is, the better your life will be. Because you can be pump and dumped like in a second, and then your company is dead. The only thing that will keep you alive is that you're doing your job properly and that you're communicating well with your investors. So they trusted you, you should trust them. I've seen lots of lack of transparency in this phase, and that is actually damaging. Running the project. Ta-da! So now we have to really have applying all the measures and everything we talked about. We have to float our token. We have to save them from being dumped. We have now to really maybe further invest some of our funding. Monetary fiscal measures. Product has to be developed if it is not done yet. And you have to inform people about every single stage. Good citizenship company management. I mean, it's business as usual, and it's very big business. It's not startup as usual, it's a real big tech company. And the sooner you know that when you start the ICO, the better for the management. That's it. I promised I will be fast. So if you have any questions, Sergeant, I don't know how it comes.
Yes, one thing I forgot to say is that after the presentations, we'll take a short break, and then we will have a panel discussion here hosted by Dan from the broadcast, and then it will be also time for questions.
Thank you, guys.
So let's have the gentleman from Stadler Völkel. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah. Okay, so it's not a problem. I'll figure it out. Well, perhaps I will not. What do I need to push, or what do I need to press to have it full screen?
The slides, or doesn't matter.
Nah, it's fine. But you can just stay here. It's okay.
Best we can do.
It's the best we can do. Ah, okay, so you all see what it is about. Again, thank you very much for having us today, Brian and myself. We are attorneys at law with an Austrian law firm, Stadler Völkl Attorneys at Law, and we have focused on everything crypto related. So a huge part of what we are doing is advising clients on cryptocurrency related stuff, not only initial coin offerings, but this is becoming a field that's becoming more and more important. And I'm here today to give you an overview over certain legal aspects if you try, or if you would like to start your own initial coin offering here in Austria, perhaps as a hub to the whole of the European Union. And Brian will then talk about US securities law. So let's dive right into it. Okay, so first of all, a huge disclaimer. Since this is being recorded, you may be viewing this in a couple of years perhaps from now. Everything that we are presenting to you now has to be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, this is to the best of our current knowledge. If you watch this in a couple of years, maybe the legal framework has changed. So please be sure to ask your advisor of choice. Okay, then I would like also to address this one question: what is an initial coin offering? We have heard that answered extensively and very well before, but I wanted to add a little twist to this thing. Then, okay, what's the distinction between coins and tokens? Perhaps I would like to give you a short overview over private law over a private law perspective on coins and tokens. Then, how is the legal situation in Austria and in the US? Okay, so we've heard that initial coin offerings are a new means of raising funds from the public. Basically what you're doing is you create a coin, either you base it on another blockchain, Ether for example, or Waves for example, then we'd usually talk about tokens, or you create a hard fork of an existing blockchain, then we would call them coins actually. So this could very well become a new means for project financing or for raising funds for startups. And you know, the thing that I always like to think, if you look at the legal situation in Austria, or at the situation how financings are usually done for young entrepreneurs, for startups, usually what you would be doing is issue qualified subordinated loans in huge chunks. And what I have thought about, you know, comparing ICOs to this traditional means of financing is, just imagine that Bitcoin, for example, was created by a company, and this company got bust like 7 years ago. Would you mind today? Not at all, since you are interested in only what they have created, which is the coin. This obviously will not be true for every coin, you can imagine. There will be developments that are not useful at all and which will develop not a sustainable market price. But generally speaking, it could very well be simply a different mechanism for financing. But obviously, as we've heard today, it's becoming easier and easier with every passing day for everyone to create their own tokens and coins and sell them to the public. And so, I mean, there's always a sort of risk for scams that could be done, and for some players who are not so honest with everyone else. Okay, so before I talk about this slide here, perhaps a quick introduction. What are coins and tokens in Austria and some other countries of the European Union, if you look at them from a property law perspective? We have done extensive research on that in the past year, made public a couple of papers, and the conclusion that we've reached is coins, such as Bitcoin, or tokens, such as each token you can imagine, are actually things in terms of property law. What does this mean? First of all, it means you can agree on transferring ownership. The legal term is actually a little bit different since it's intangible goods, but you can transfer ownership over these coins and tokens from one person to another. You can enter into agreements. You can have sales agreements. You can have lease agreements. You can have you can gift coins and tokens. So you can enter into all sorts of agreements. And the reason for that is because coins and tokens qualify as things in terms of property law. Why do they qualify as things? Under Austrian law, we have actually it's only two requirements. First of all, what you're talking about needs to be different from a human, which is quite obvious when you're talking about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And second of all, it has to these coins have to fulfill a purpose for a person. And this element is filled in by a requirement of controllability. So you have to be able to control something to refer to it as a thing or to legally qualify it as a thing. And if we look at cryptocurrencies, this becomes very apparent. For example, if you look at software and other intangible goods, such as music files, software, domain names, they have all been qualified as things in terms of property law. And if you compare that to coins and tokens, where you need to know a private key in order to transfer them, it becomes very apparent that you have a very strong element of controllability with respect to coins and tokens. So the first conclusion that I wanted to present to you here is coins and tokens qualify as things. And usually at this point, I take a piece of paper and tell to you, this is a piece of paper. It qualifies as a thing. But that's not the only perspective you could look at it. You could also look at it from a capital markets perspective or from a consumer rights protection perspective. So if you were to print on this paper terms and conditions for a security, it could possibly become a security. If I were to print on this paper, this is a voucher to be redeemed with Stadtlaufwirkliche attorneys at law for 1 hour of free legal advice or for 1 hour of legal advice, then this would become a voucher. So the mere fact that you could qualify something as a thing does not necessarily tell you how else you could qualify it. And that's why it's really important, if you plan your own ICO, to structure it in a way that makes sense, basically. So you can structure, so what you see here on this slide is basically the classification. If your coin offers rights to their coin holders, for example, you pay them dividends or you promise them interest, then they could qualify as securities. If you tell them this coin or token could be used as a sort of voucher to be redeemed for your products and services, then this becomes a voucher. And depending on what you are promising to your purchasers or investors, different legal regimes apply in Austria. And it's really important to notice the law is technology blind, so to speak. It really doesn't matter which technology you're using. If you're putting terms and conditions of securities on paper, they become securities. If you're using blockchain for it, there's no qualitative difference. You can create securities also by issuing tokens. It really only matters what you are promising your investors. And in Austria, and actually that's true for the whole of the European Union, as far as I know, we don't have a legal definition of what a security actually is. It's only defined as by comparing the thing that you're offering to classical sorts of securities, such as bonds or shares. So every time that you are promising to your investors rights that you would commonly associate with securities, such as bonds or shares, so rights to dividend, rights to interest payments, a right to a say in how the company develops, this could be qualified as securities. So why would you care if something qualifies as a security? What's the result out of this? So if you are issuing a token which would qualify as a security under European law, you have to comply with capital markets regulation. Mostly meaning you have to prepare a capital market prospectus. This is basically a huge pile of information that you give to your investors, where you tell them what does your company do, how does the security or the token that you offer work, how is it transferred, what risks are associated with the investment. And this is, I'd really like to stress this, and I will perhaps say it a couple of times over and over. If you are not complying with securities regulation, in most of the European countries, this is a criminal offense. So you can go before a well, I mean, you could go, yeah, in the worst case, you could go to jail. But you will definitely face criminal charges, at the very least. So please keep that in mind when you are structuring your initial coin offering. And I sometimes like to compare this with the situation that we had in the 1990s, where like everybody knew, yeah, there's something like a like copyright law, but people were still sharing their music files on the internet, and nobody really took it seriously. And I'm kind of reminded of that. There is something like a securities law, and if you want to finance your company with an ICO, please make sure that you comply with it. The same is true for investments. Since we only have very limited time, I'm going to skip this whole part. Also make sure you're not offering an investment. And what I'd like to point out is, if you've made sure that your ICO is not a security offering, that doesn't mean that there are no laws that you have to comply with. If you're selling a voucher token, or if you're selling another kind of utility token, there's still the European Consumer Rights Directive, which requires you to inform your purchasers in this case. They're not investors actually. It's like if you were selling software on the internet, to inform the purchasers about certain things, so to speak. What are these things? Most importantly, what are they actually purchasing? What can they do with these tokens? What are you planning to do if it's a project that is not fully developed, if you are only in the stages of programming a service, or in the process of establishing facilities to produce your new product that you want to sell, where this token serves as a voucher for. So you have to inform your the purchasers about certain information, and also make sure that the sales process is done properly. If you are not, I mean, we have done this numerous times now. In the end, it's rather easy. You let people check off a couple of check boxes in the sales process, but if they're not formulated correctly, perhaps your consumer, your purchasers, if they are consumers, have a right in the European Union to withdraw from the contract. And in the worst case, this right to withdraw from the contract is 1 year and 14 days. So keep that in mind. If you do that, if you do the ICO not properly, you face possibly people who want their money back for more than a year. Okay, so to wrap this all up, if you're selling a token, make sure it's either a security token, then comply with the capital markets regulation. If it's not a security token, then comply with the European Consumer Rights Directive. And also, last but not least, sometimes there could be other laws involved too. For example, payment services, the Payment Services Act, or the Payment Services Directive, or the Alternative Investment Fund Act, or Alternative Investment Fund Directive. It really depends on how you're structuring your business. So for example, if you were to obtain funds, I mean, it's a really awesome idea. You could think of creating a smart contract. People are sending tokens to you, or coins. You issue to them tokens, use the cryptos that you have received, you sell them on the market, receive money, then for example purchase a dwelling in the inner city of Vienna, rent it out, use the money that you receive, convert it back into into coins, put these coins into the smart token, into the smart contract, and the smart contract then distributes your profits to token holders. Easy, simple, elegant idea. please make sure that you're not fall into, for example, the Alternative Investment Funds Act. That's, yeah, keep that in mind. If this was all a little bit too complicated, I would like to make you aware of a service that we have programmed, which is available on the website www.ICO-focused.com. It simply asks you a couple of questions and gives you a first estimate of your, in which category your ICO will fall. Okay, and at this point, I have the honor to give the stage to you, Brian.
Thanks, Oliver. So, by way of quick introduction, my name is Brian Holman. I am a New York attorney, and I work as counsel at Stadler Vogel. Just to add on to the legal disclaimer that Oliver gave earlier, this presentation is not legal advice and is for informational purposes only. So what I'm going to be talking about is US legal considerations to keep in mind in running an ICO. You may ask yourself, why is this important if I'm issuing these tokens in Europe or somewhere else in the world? The Securities Act of 1933 makes it a crime to sell or offer unregistered securities in the United States without an exemption from registration. The SEC and the Department of Justice, excuse me, the SEC is the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. They're the federal regulator in the United States of securities. They have said time and time again over the last year or two that tokens or coins or cryptocurrencies, whatever you want to call them, can be securities under US federal law if they fit certain characteristics. We've seen that over the last year with the Dow report, Munchie Inc. cease and desist order by the SEC, and then even more recently with some criminal fraud cases by Arise Bank and Centra Tech. So this all begs the question, when can a token be considered a security under US securities law? And that's exactly what I'm going to cover. So a security under the Securities Act of 1933 is this massively long definition. The point of this slide is not for you to read the whole thing. You don't need to memorize it. It's just to show you that a security is an incredibly broad term under the federal securities laws, and it pretty much encompasses a lot of things that you may not traditionally think of or label as a security. The operative term that we're looking at tonight is whether something can be considered an investment contract and thus a security. And so to see what exactly is an investment contract, we have to look at a 1946 Supreme Court case that promulgated the Howey test. It's a 4-element test, and the opinion states that an investment contract generally is an investment of money in a common enterprise with a reasonable expectation of profits to be derived from the entrepreneurial or managerial efforts of others. And I'm going to go by one and apply each of these factors to cryptocurrencies and to tokens. So the first element is an investment of money. This is actually relatively straightforward in terms of tokens. Money is anything of value. It's not only cash, but can be Bitcoin or Ether or any other cryptocurrency that has value. Because it's pretty straightforward, I'm just going to move ahead to the next element. The second element is a common enterprise. Legally speaking, it's actually quite complicated because there's a split amongst the federal circuit courts as to what exactly the test should be. The two tests are horizontal commonality test, and the second is vertical commonality. Horizontal commonality requires the pooling of investors' funds that tie the fortunes of each investor to the success of the overall venture. In some courts, even, it gets more specific than that. The profits have to be distributed to investors on a pro rata basis. The second test is vertical commonality. There are two variations of it. There's narrow and broad. Narrow economic successes of the investor and the promoter must be mutually dependent, and broad success or failure of the investment must be dependent on the expertise of the promoter. Now that's a lot of technical legal talk, but I think at the end of the day, most projects are going to be investments in a common enterprise. Usually there's a developer who's developing a platform or an ecosystem or some kind of enterprise, and I think you can assume in most cases this test will be fulfilled no matter what test you view it under. So the third element is probably the most controversial of them all. There's been a lot of talk these days about what this element means and applied to a cryptocurrency context. A reasonable expectation of profits means basically that you expect to have a financial return on your investment, however that may be achieved. The point of confusion is that this test turns in part on the motivations and expectations of the investor. And there's no expectation of profits when the investment is in a commodity for the purpose of personal use or consumption. And some examples I like to give for this is if you go buy a ticket or a token at the Vienna to go ride a roller coaster, or if you buy tokens to wash your clothes at a laundromat, you're not buying those tokens because you expect that the value will all of a sudden go up and then you can sell them for a profit. You're buying them because you can consume them either by riding the roller coaster or by washing your laundry. So in the context of crypto, this gets complicated when you start to talk about utility tokens. Tokens that have some kind of utility value, they can be used in some way that's separate from just being traded on a stock exchange, for example. We got some clarity from the SEC earlier this year, or maybe it was late last year, in a cease and desist order that was issued against Munchie Incorporated. Munchie Inc. was a company that was developing a food rating app, and they issued their token, the MUN token, that was to be used on this app to incentivize users to rate restaurants, rate food, and maybe they could even order food using the coin. The SEC in their cease and desist order explained that a reasonable expectation of profits include priming purchasers' expectations of profits. This includes use of blogs, podcasts, social media, promotional videos, etc., that tout the value of the token gaining in value, or even evidence of trading on secondary markets or planning on trading on secondary markets. And also they highlighted this argument that the Munchie was making that the more people who participate on this platform or ecosystem, the higher the demand for the token will be, and thus the price will increase. All this constituted a reasonable expectation of profits through priming purchasers' expectations, all despite the fact that the MUN token had certain utility characteristics. And then the fourth element is not too complicated. The profits have to be derived from the management effort of others. And this, I think you find in most cases where it's not obviously the investors who are doing the work, but it's the development team or someone else. It doesn't have to be just the development team, but there has to be a significant effort. The courts have explained that this is a flexible rather than a static approach, so I think in most cases this will be not a problem. So just to conclude, the bottom line is that it's a crime to offer or sell unregistered securities in the US. Tokens, even those that have utility characteristics, could be securities under the Howey test. So going forward with your ICO, you basically have two options. You can either exclude the US from your ICO entirely. There are several ways to do that. Or you can try to seek an exemption from registration. There are several available, but depending on your project, there could be more or less, a couple that are more or less suitable for you. If you choose to go with the later option, you have to be really careful because the SEC is closely monitoring the space, and they will be watching if you issue securities in the US. That's all I have.
Thanks a lot. Sorry. I know I said we would ask questions later, but do you mind just giving us one piece of information? I've seen it myself that quite a few people believe that it's sufficient to write somewhere on your website, this is not aimed at US citizens. Is that sufficient, or do you have to actually go through KYC and really exclude US citizens from your, so like prevent them from being able to buy a token?
Yeah, so as a lawyer, I take probably the more conservative approach. Under Regulation S, which is an exemption to do offshore offerings, you can't have any directed efforts to sell your securities in the US. And so I think it's really, you have to be really careful to show that you're not making any efforts, and you have to, I think, proactively exclude US persons from taking part, either that being through IP blocking or KYC. I think that's an important step.
Thanks a lot. So, yes, sure. Sorry? So I would say let's make a short break, maybe 10 up to 15 minutes, and then we can have, sorry? Or that's an option as well. Would you prefer to have our panel discussion now and then? 5 minutes, okay. Let's be back here at 8:17 on my watch. So I'll repeat this later on as well, but just to make this a bit more fun, if you want to test our wallet at wallet.viennanode.eu, do not put any serious money on it. Open a new account. Don't lose your money by testing our wallet. That's perfect, but do not put $1 million of anything on this wallet. You can just use it for testing, and first 10 people who send anything to this address using Vienna Node wallet will get some cool tokens in their wallets later on, especially if they also lease their waves to the Vienna Node. So would you guys mind sharing one microphone? We only have two, unfortunately.
Yeah, what's even worse than trying to avoid regulation at all costs is
actually more work.
yeah, but what's worse is if you just
Okay.
ignore it and then hope for the best.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone in 2018 is doing that anymore. I think in 2017 people were ignoring regulations and taxes, but now at least the people I have contact with are pretty much aware of it. And
So let's continue. You guys are awesome. You ladies and guys are awesome for staying in spite of this heat. Obviously, the topic and our speakers are super interesting. I guess one more time, as a general message of this meetup, and it will be a message that I'll repeat many times in the future. If you're planning to issue your own token, which, as I said earlier, on the Waves platform is extremely easy. I'm totally standing here with a beer in my hand, by the way, I just realized. Why not? Cheers. So it's extremely easy and super cheap to launch a token on the Waves platform, but don't be tricked into believing that the consequences of that are as light as just clicking a button. So if you don't already have advisors, we have some excellent ones here. That goes for you in the room, but also for the people online. Yeah, that's it. The expert panel hosted by Dan from Der Brutkasten. I don't have another beer, but thanks for being here and thanks for doing this, and take it away.
It's my pleasure. So welcome from my side as well. We're a media company from Austria, writing about startups, innovation, digital economy, and we have one focus channel also on the topic of blockchain, crypto, economy in general. So I'm very happy to host this panel and to talk about ICOs, what are ICOs and how to deal with them really. So I would just really start with a question, Brian, maybe towards you. You finish with legislation, with regulations, and I had one more question. First of all, maybe you could just wrap it up. When is actually the case that US law is applicable? If any people here are gonna tokenize their product, by tokenizing my product, do I already have to worry about breaking US law? And Oliver, maybe to you, is there any country to consider? If I tokenize my business, do I maybe also violate, I don't know, Chinese law, Singapore law, Hong Kong law, any other law? How do I really tackle this problem of worldwide regulation?
So thanks for your question. You really have to worry about US law under a couple of circumstances. One, if you consider your token to be a security, that's what really brings you within the ambit of the federal securities laws. And then two is if you plan on offering or selling your securities or your tokens in the United States or to US persons. Those can be US citizens, or they could also be US residents, so green card holders would be included in that. So if you're considering doing that, then you really need to be mindful of the federal securities laws. I would say you need to be mindful in any event because you still are under an obligation to not direct any selling efforts in the United States. So I think you have to take affirmative measures to block the US from taking part in your securities offering.
Yeah, and then thanks for addressing the rest of the world to me, basically. This is really a tough question, and I mean, what we try to do for our clients is to sort of stay on top of the developments that we see all over the world, and to inform them of what we see has changed in the last couple of weeks, and regularly update them in terms of regulation. But the thing is, of course, we're Austrian lawyers, you're a New York lawyer, we of course can only advise on Austrian law and on European law and on US law. And if you really want to stay on the safe side, you would have to have a local counsel in every single jurisdiction you want to make your offer in. That's obviously not really a practical approach, I know, but if you want to stay on the safe side, that's the only thing that's reasonable. And perhaps a second note, or a second answer to that. You said it already, selling efforts. That's also sort of a buzzword for the European legislation. Usually, if you want to check whether a certain security law applies or whether a certain jurisdiction applies its laws, you have to look into that jurisdiction, because this jurisdiction will decide the prerequisites for its laws to apply. In the European Union, it's also quite similar to what you've said about the US. It's really dependent on the selling efforts that you put into selling your securities in a certain jurisdictions. So if you're having a website that's in German, the regulators will most likely assume that you're directing your selling efforts towards Austria or Germany, for example. If you then actively prevent people to access the information on your website, which you can do, will be interpreted in your favor. And IP blocking is a good, appropriate means of doing that. In addition, usually we would also work with disclaimers and agreements at the very beginning when you're entering a website. So it's not only the blocking, but also informing on the website.
But just, does it mean to be completely on the safe side? If I'm doing an ICO in Austria, do I just have to block the rest of the world?
Well, no. Of course, so for example, if you come to our law firm, we could also advise you how to do it securely in the US, or Brian, you could do that. But there are a couple of jurisdictions that we would really advise not to offer your securities or your tokens. So China would be an example. India seems to have developed to be also an example for that. And the US, unless you follow certain rules.
Toshitsu, you have been advising a lot of ICOs from non-legal perspective now. What is your experience with this issue of global different legislations? What do you advise to your startups? What kind of experiences have you made so far?
First of all, it really makes a huge difference if it is utility token or security token. And yes, I had the cases where we excluded fully US. At some moment it became a must until we had a clear situation how to handle it. China, Taiwan, and some other jurisdictions. It does not prevent 100% people from these jurisdictions investing, but it is basically on KYC and AML procedure to prove that they can invest. Sometimes if they're registered, then they can be registered in other countries as well. However, it is possible to do all the homework. For some crypto funds have done it, and that is lots of work, but can be done.
Oliver, maybe your law firm was the law firm that did the first ICO according to Austrian law. You've been working on the Austrian legislation strongly. Maybe just a quick question in this regard. What is the status quo in terms of regulation? As far as I understand, the crypto community in Austria, although we are entrepreneurs and startups who actually want deregulation in the field of cryptocurrencies, and ICOs want strong regulation, and the sooner the better. What is the current situation in terms of legislation? Do you have to be creative as a lawyer, or do you have clear path in terms of regulating?
So I also have said this a couple of times before. There's no place on Earth, and probably also not in the universe, where no laws apply. There's always regulation. You only have to be certain what regulation applies. That's why I said before, you either fall into the securities laws or you don't. We have proper regulation in Austria. We know exactly which laws to apply in what cases. There are sometimes cases in between. Usually we could then simply go to the regulator and ask them. That's also my, I would like to endorse this opportunity, or to tell people that this is actually an option. You can go to the regulator, ask them questions. They will answer to you, and they will help you establish whether your business model or your ICO model is feasible or not. So this is basically something that we can do already with the current regulation. The Federal Ministry of Finance, I guess, has established a working group on crypto regulation for ICOs, but there's not really an outcome as of today. And unfortunately, what I've seen in the past is we've really put lots of efforts into kind of getting a regulation, an environment strict that is really focused on ICOs in Austria. This has not. We had a Minister of Economics who was really also behind cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and I thought, okay, this could work. Sort of, this hope has sort of passed. And a couple of weeks ago, I was at an event on the European level where I also talked about cryptocurrencies and ICOs. And what I have seen there is also the European regulator sort of has this approach of, well, we should not do our own thing. We have to sort of get all the other jurisdictions globally involved and see what they are doing. So it's I think we are stuck with our current regulation for the next couple of years. And if you look at the update of the 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, this took 3 or 4 years until this will become law in Austria. So the new regulation will come, but it will come slowly, and we have to deal with the one that we have currently.
Okay, one other question that I also want to clarify at the beginning. We talk about ICOs often in the community with different players, and I've heard different opinions. Some say, yes, ICOs can finance technology, blockchain technology projects that would usually be financed by states, like when you're talking about development of new protocols, of new technology, where you don't have a business case behind it, but where it's technology, open source technology for everybody. And this is where everybody says ICOs are fine in this case. When it comes to financing your business with possibly new way of financing, many community members say, no, this is where we don't want to go to. What is your point? Maybe Dušica, I'll begin with you. When is an ICO acceptable? Is it also acceptable as a financing form?
It is actually developing. It is a new financing form, and it is picking up the pace. At the beginning, it was only about the open source. It was only about financing tech, and this was 2017. And we have seen it started, it exploded July, August last year, exactly because of that. And now things have been developing. People have understood the importance of tokens. They have understood the future and how the blockchain can take parts of their businesses. I'm working particularly with 2 ICOs now that are combining blockchain and AI. They already have developed products, and they're tokenizing their economy within their system. They do understand that future is tokenized economy. And that is something which lots of people still can see as doubtful, but it is happening. And I would say that ICO will shape up more. It will mature, it will change, we will see split. Now we have regular funding, we have hybrid funding, and then we have pure ICO. So it's already showing that, for example, the hybrid model would be ideal for a company that already exists, that can integrate blockchain to a certain extent, and then basically have tokenized economy with certain advantage. So I definitely think ICO is here to stay, and it will change even more.
Yeah, and to add one point on that, the technology is really a game changer. If you look at, and so I've studied law here in Austria, and I've studied law in the US. And one of the main things, broadly speaking, what I took from the US was this openness towards the capital market. And this is something that I think really is lacking here in Austria. So financing of businesses is done by a bank usually, and it's becoming more and more difficult for banks to issue loans to companies. And so this has really become a sort of problem for financing new businesses. And that's how venture capital came into play, and all sorts of things. But a capital market, a strong capital market, has not really formed in the last 50 years in continental Europe. And I sometimes ask myself, well, why? Well, because banks have a natural interest not to have a strong capital market, because they want to be the intermediaries who do all the financing. I mean, it's good business. And if you now have a look at how you can do capital markets issuings using blockchain technology, I mean, this is really a game changer. It's exactly the example that I gave to you before. You can issue tokens. You can promise all the token holders to pay them dividend or pay them interest payments, and you receive your investments through tokens that you exchange for real currency. You do your business using the money you have obtained, and then once a year you take part of your earnings or interest payments, convert them back into a token, and send it to all your coin and send it to all your token holders through a smart contract. And you can do that without having to touch a bank, except when you want to go from crypto to regular economy and from regular economy to crypto economy. That's actually the only point where you need banks. And they can really prevent this whole new form of capital markets or ecosystem from evolving if they want to. And I think that's why it's important to also get banks on board. That's also a message I wanted to
just to say, I absolutely agree with everything that Volker said, and I'm seeing lots of changes also in capital markets field. I just came from London and I met with the people who have done the first cryptocurrency denominated bonds. I mean, the merger from the real world and the crypto world is really happening. Lots of new things are happening. So I'm definitely convinced that the ICO, of course, as a form of funding will stay, but many more other things will start happening, or actually they're already happening as we speak. This is very fast field. Can you imagine how much it grew within less than a year? I mean, look at it, what was happening last year at this time in July, for example, and look where we are sitting today. We're talking about 12 billion entered the market in various products. These products, not every one of them will fail. They will deliver. That will change the world.
I've been told in this first phase of ICOs or crypto investment, there was a lot of so-called dumb money in the market, and now we're waiting for institutional investors to enter the market. Do you see that coming now? They already did?
They already did. The big driver of first quarter 2018 are actually institutional investors. My core expertise is with fundraising, particularly working with institutional investors, and I can confirm that almost every serious family office, every serious investor has desk who is doing the cryptocurrencies, looking into it. I can say that it is already out there. This is the biggest driver of 2018.
Just to finish this chapter, so to say, we did have a lot of scams as well in this first phase, and a lot of, let's say, strongly marketing-driven ICOs with bonuses, with other incentives. There are a lot of critical community members in this term. So is this going to fade out? Is this going to change now? Are we maturing as an ICO community?
Yes, I can also tell you that, for example, there is one new combination of blockchain AI that is coming. It was founded by Eric Lee, the co-founder of LinkedIn. It's ICO, it's called Hub. They have issued now the special part of the program, which is ICO Hub, exactly battling scammers. And this is, I'm personally very negative about all the people trying to scam, because it is so innovative, it is so new. It brings lots of advantages and benefits to every single person on this planet, and then there is someone who just wants to buy a car and basically goes out and lies and copies and puts people without their permission. I mean, also ICO advisors are very oftenly put on these white papers and websites, legal advisors, without ever meeting these people. Sometimes people fail because of the scammers within the industry, like those who issue the tokens for them. I've told you recently about this case in Spain and UK, and that's why I'm always advising to go for a very strong partner, someone like Waves or Vienna node and people who are actually doing this with ethical principles, because you're trusting someone that they will direct all this money you're raising to particular wallet, and what if someone gives in all the documents wrong address? So you end up without absolutely everything. This happened, and I think this is really important to have real players on board, to look at the track record and not really to go for serious team members.
What is interesting for me now as well is the question of costs. At the beginning of the whole ICOs, we saw it was very easy to earn money with that. In the meantime, it's become very expensive to raise money. You need professional lawyers, you need tax advisors, you need business advisors who can do that. I've been told that you need at least 500,000 euros to finance your ICO. So what are the costs for the people who want to tokenize their business in your consideration?
Yeah, so from my experience, I can tell you that the largest part are advertising costs. The legal fees are only a small fraction of that. I'm not sure if you really need €500,000 for a successful ICO, but yeah, the largest chunk is advertising.
I will confirm that the largest chunk of money you have to spend is going to be on marketing. It's a competition out there. You're basically addressing the whole world. You have to do your proper homework. You have to have a proper legal help. You have to have proper tax help. This is extremely important. You have to set up all the things about bank and everything in advance. Most of the team members and advisors, of course, will be having certain success element in it. So this is not the biggest cost, but marketing costs a lot. $500,000 was a pretty much rounded amount. I've seen ICOs going with less. I've seen it, but I've seen them doing with more. I definitely think that's what made also hybrid models so popular, because you would raise seed and then you would go for it. That is also important because you will have actual people looking into your business model before you hit the market. So for me, this kind of protection is actually certain protection also for the people doing the ICO, that they're already hitting the market, having the flavor of the world, where they really stand, what they should change or not, how easily they attract pre-ICO seed money, and then really diving in, because once you're out there, there's lots of malicious people. You will be torn apart. I mean, there are people really trolling your sites and commenting on everything. So the more negative comments you can get at super early stage, the better for you. Going after the money, which will help you do the ICO, is one of the ways to test your ideas a lot.
This is a great point, and I didn't know about this hybrid model up until today, because what I've been thinking so far is the following. How can an end consumer be able to evaluate the business he's investing in? We have venture capitalists who have teams of tens or hundreds of people who are doing the due diligence. They're doing nothing but due diligence. They really know what they're doing, and still 5 startups will fail, 2 or 3 will be successful, 2 will be very, very successful. And these are professionals. So how on earth can a private person be able to evaluate a white paper? And I think this hybrid structure...
It is a hybrid, but it is also, I really always advise people to invest into things they understand. If I'm, for example, in food business, I should be focused on either supply chain, blockchain, or things like that where I really understand. If I'm a financial person, I really try to add value where the finance makes sense, so that I understand what it brings to the world. If you're just investing into the hype, you're really in serious problem. But this is not the first, come on, from 16th century, if you invested in tulips, in famous tulip mania, people who are just investing for hype, they're really in a problem.
But they have to be aware of the fact that that's pure speculation, so don't take a loan on your house to invest.
Exactly. Exactly, and every single person I know, serious person in crypto space, is constantly saying the same. Invest into the things you understand, go to the community, meet the team members, really understand if there is experts in this field that you understand within the team members, do your due diligence, and then invest. Just don't invest just to make quick bucks.
You both are approached by many people who are trying to do the ICO. And I know you turn a lot of them also down. So what are your criteria? How do you choose the ICOs that you want to advise?
Honestly, gut feeling. I mean, you sort of have a understand, or if you know people, you see who the scammers are and who are trustworthy people. And up until now, this was a good approach. That's actually the only thing I could answer to that.
On my behalf, I used the same thing as I did when I was doing the fundraising in Alphabet Funding. I really choose very few of them. I work very closely with them. I go hand in hand through the whole process with them. So for me, it is very important that I have understanding that people are really committed to it, that they do understand that within 6 months they will have seriously big company in their hands. I mean, it's my reputation at stake, so I really don't want to play with people who really don't get it, and they will just they just go as the things go. So I would say I do my own due diligence. I really meet people, and I have to believe in team.
What about so to say tokenizability of a case? There are people who say you can put everything on the blockchain, and there are people who say you can't put everything on the blockchain, and it only makes sense if that and that and that. Do you also look at the business that they want to tokenize? Dušica, maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, we even talked before here, and I meet all the time people that believe everything can be on blockchain. I don't believe everything can be on blockchain. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how the world will develop. I can just say at this moment of time, like we are sitting here, I don't believe that all the business models I'm looking at can be on blockchain. On the other side, maybe in 5 years' time, everything will be on blockchain.
Oliver, you did, I think, so far already 5, 6, 7, or even more ICOs according to Austrian law. What are the first learnings that you can draw, that you can share with us when some new founders want to do the ICO? What were the critical points?
Yeah, I mean, there are really a lot of laws that you have to keep in mind. As I said before, I mean, there's the Austrian Capital Markets Act, but that's not the only one. For example, I've seen a few other ICOs that that were not clients of ours, and I have asked myself, is this even feasible? I mean, there's, for example, something that's called the issuing and administering of payment instruments. So if you want to establish your own currency for, I don't know, books that every bookstore would accept, this could most likely be a regulated business where you need a banking license for. And I've seen ICOs in Austria that are getting really close to that. And there's also the Alternative Investment Funds Act. If you're obtaining cryptos and you invest them into certain businesses and pay out revenue from your investments, it could most likely be an alternative investment fund. And so the learnings are, okay, there's a handful of laws, but you have to be really, really careful to structure your token or your business model in a way that you don't fall into these laws. And also, one learning perhaps is don't be afraid of regulation. There's nothing wrong with issuing a securities token. So I'm glad to say that we have. It seems to be European-wide the first security token that where we have created a capital market prospectus that is currently under review by the Austrian regulator. And so the learnings are, it's really a tricky question of structuring. But if you do it right, you can actually attract a lot of money with it, since the market is potentially very large. And also one additional thing, I said before, where you need banks is the moment when you want to switch from cryptos to real fiat currency, and also when you want to switch back usually. And this is really tricky. And I've said this also in the past at other events. There's actually no KYC obligations for ICO issuers in Austria. But you better do KYC, because if you don't, then your local bank will most likely not help you with getting crypto back into fiat. So there's not only hard law, so to speak, but there's a lot of soft law and not even law, but still things you better comply with, because otherwise you won't get far. That's perhaps also learning.
Would that be similar in the US, Brian?
Yeah, it's similar in the US in terms of issuer requirements for KYC or AML. It doesn't usually fall to the issuer, but to other players in securities offerings, such as underwriters or broker dealers. So it's really advisable to do your own KYC, and then you won't run into any problems later on when you try to interact with financial institutions.
So are ICOs taking money away from banks and venture capitalists?
Taking away money from banks and venture capitalists, likely, but I think also for this, I mean, so my background is actually banking, finance, capital markets. So I'm used to advising banks. I know what, at least in part, what's important to a bank and how they are doing their business. And I really don't get why banks are not jumping all over the crypto market, because this is the future for them. And they have a competitive advantage, namely KYC. In at least, or in 1 year's time from now, at the latest, we'll have the updated 4th AML directive and an updated anti-money laundering law in all of Europe. Banks have a competitive advantage. They know how to do this. They have been regulated for the past 15 years. So if any banking CEO should watch this again, please consider going crypto.
Dušica, maybe one interesting question that I've heard in one of the recent conferences in Vienna in terms of attracting institutional investors. Is there clarity in terms of which asset class is presented by cryptocurrencies and investments in crypto?
Yes and no. Depends really on what kind of token you're looking at. I think that this is why we are seeing more and more structured products, which is attracted to institutional investors. I can tell you that I've seen a wave. It is disrupting VC industry, but I've seen them really interested in coming into it. I myself work with one startup that is actually developing non-fungible tokens, which is per se the asset class, because it can contain the real world asset in itself, and it's defined by the imprint of the value of the asset in it, so automatically can be classified. On the other side, the tokens which are traded, some of them, yes, can be classified, some of them not.
And in terms of these non-fungible tokens, thank you, I forget the term all the time. With them, I'm able to invest in real estate, for example. What are the use cases?
That is actually the one of the hottest things of 2018. ERC 721, ERC 725. It's starting. This is the non-fungible token, because the way how it is made, unlike the ERC20, which everyone is similar to each other, this one is different, so you can imprint the real thing in it. We have the protocol, we developed the protocol for that, and basically we have around 15 use cases that we have identified. Some of them already developed, some of them we are talking to the people. One of the use cases is KYC, because your identity can be stored and you can basically put it in your wallet, MetaMask, you can use it at your will when you approach new exchange or whatever you want to do with it. Certifications, diplomas, certificates and credentials, which is, I've seen a huge wave of new startups using that will change the HR industry, because you will actually, your applicant will be interviewing with you, so I'm just putting in my wallet, you are my HR person, you get diplomas and you know is the real one, so there is not the possibility to fake it. Because it is everyone is unique, it's reissuable, which makes a huge difference to what we had last year. Or, for example, decentralized exchanges, or loyalty programs, software certificates, even the health records. Imagine us that lived in multiple countries, and whenever I come to a new country, I have to quote to my doctor, I cannot take penicillin. I think my mom told me I had measles, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll call her tomorrow, but she doesn't remember. That is going to disappear, because you will be able to put all the health records and everything in this particular vault, which is in your wallet, and you can immediately transfer it when you change the doctor. I mean, this is just one of the use cases. I can tell you that we have the technology is done, protocol is done. We have developed ourselves 2 dApps. So this is, I know lots of people have been in Blockchain Expo last week, so I know lots of people actually doing these things in very advanced stage, so it's not in ideation phase. So I think it's basically around the corner. Samsung, I think Samsung is already making a phone which is going to use blockchain dApps.
Wow.
That was, I think, announcement a couple of weeks ago.
I'll ask you a last question before we open up for a Q&A so that we don't like take too long.
Or before everyone melts.
Before everyone melts. But it will be a bit provocative, but I just thought about it and I hear it a lot. We are talking about these products as if the technology would be 100 years old and perfectly functional. So we also hear the scalability problems, the transaction costs. And maybe, Sergeant, you can also join us because it's about waves, solving many of these problems. But there are a lot of products there that are being promised, but that are not functional yet, that are not developed yet, because we know on the Ethereum platform, you have scalability problems. What is the status quo in these terms? Are we talking about products that are actually working on the block, or is this going to come in 3-4 years that we're going to have functional products?
I was actually talking about the products that are working. I particularly like to choose to work with the teams that are close to delivering something concrete. Yes, there's lots of products. The technology is not, but this is why we are seeing the rise of NAM, NEO, One, I think, not to mention many others, because there is lots of people around the world constantly working on improving these things. For me, it was, I was totally scared last year about, when you have the old type of token, you lose the private key, you lose everything. For me, that was a huge bottleneck to do anything real. How can I put any real value in something that I can lose? I mean, that was, so now we already have the answer. Just a couple of months after, people came up with new options. Technology is developing all the time. It's not done 100% yet, otherwise we would be raising the second coin offering or the third coin offering, not the initial coin offering. But I would say that I've seen some things actually functioning. Exchanges is a good use case, I believe, of blockchain economy.
Yeah, I think scalability is a really big issue. I think most of the big tokens that are out there that are trading, even the really big ones, don't have a functional platform that can be used yet. I've even seen a white paper that is based on the Ethereum blockchain and then banks on the possibility that sometime in the future the scalability problem will be solved, and then the platform will be run on that future system. So I see it as a really big problem. We'll see if it can be solved with other approaches than proof of work, maybe proof of stake, we'll see. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll keep myself I'll only have a short remark. I think scalability is an issue, sure, but if you look at how technology advances, so we are basically at a moment in time where we are not really sure which blockchain will become the next big thing. I mean, if you remember in the 90s, with the search engines, like everybody was using Alta Vista and Yahoo, and I can even remember films where they traveled back in time and then said, you have to invest into Yahoo. How much use would that be today? I mean, perhaps, who knows, but Google would be the better choice. And we are not really sure which blockchain that's been developed becomes the next Google, or whether this blockchain has even been developed yet. So we're still in the early stages, I would say. But what's certain is the technology is here to stay. And that's why, again, whichever enterprise you're working in, make sure that you familiarize yourself with the blockchain, because it will disrupt also your business most likely sometime in the future.
And what I often heard from experts, well, you're also a young audience and I think you've all done it, but if somebody else asks you, read the Satoshi Nakamoto paper to understand the basics of what we're talking about. So this helps in understanding also very, very much. For me, it's very interesting to observe the development. It's extremely fast. I moderate maybe every week, every second week. I'm asked to moderate a panel on blockchain, and the level of discussion increases so fast. Every second week, I learn so many new things. You have hybrid institutional investors investments that you're explaining about tonight. 2 months ago, we were talking about the money. It's complete development and so fast development, and I think we all have to stay on track and help each other to learn and to grow in these fields. So I would like to open up the... yes, please.
You gave me a perfect segue to say a few words about what attracted me to Waves. Exactly that. So the way I see it, and I'm not the original developer of this thought, I've picked it up from somebody else, but I've adopted it, is that Bitcoin was blockchain 1.0, or is still alive, very much alive. Ethereum is in a way blockchain 2.0 with the addition of smart contracts and token issuance and other functionality. And Waves is a perfect representative of blockchain 3.0 technology. So we had CryptoKitties a couple of months ago. I can't even remember if it was a month or 2 or 3 ago. Okay, and we've seen the Ethereum network almost collapse. I was super happy to have CryptoKitties because it brought tons of new coverage to blockchain as a technology. Millions of people learned about blockchain through that. But again, Ethereum network can process around 7 transactions per second. Waves demonstrably can process at least 435 transactions per second, which is the case we had a few days ago. We have not touched the technical limit of the Waves platform. There is not enough users on the platform to reach 1,000 or 1,500 transactions per second, which this technology is capable of. So yeah, the technology is developing amazingly fast. And another thing you all said, and I feel very, very urgently in my own case, is I literally feel, I've said it before, I feel like I'm running, trying to catch up to reality of this industry that I'm involved with. I've been in and around cryptocurrencies since 2010. I've started Vienna Node 2 months ago, and I sleep 5 hours a night because there's so much happening every single day. It's absolutely crazy. So if you're not still involved in blockchain development or building services on top of blockchain, do it. Thanks. Yes, yes.
Pricer, on one additional question, as you mentioned, proof of work and proof of stake. Waves is already...
Proof of stake, yeah.
And it's functioning.
Not only functioning, it's functioning amazingly well, yes. Yes.
I think a year ago, it was 2 years ago, it was a nice year.
Yeah. Amazing developments.
I would kindly ask you just to repeat the question.
I will repeat the questions who anybody asks. So, who wants to start first? Do you have any questions? Yes.
I'm interested actually in the new development in Switzerland because Zug seems to be the new crypto valley, and how you as a lawyer see Switzerland as a possible base for ICO.
So the question was, in terms of Zug becoming a crypto valley, how do you see this development? And maybe I can add to this question, how do you see Vienna positioned in the European competition and maybe global competition?
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct. Switzerland was sort of the first country that has seen this potential. And I think in my personal view, it's simply because Switzerland has always tried to be at the forefront in terms of financial developments. And what I have seen actually is, I mean, I'm an Austrian lawyer, and this is only what I've seen from outside of Switzerland. Regulation has been passed there, and the regulation has become stricter. I think this is also something that will happen in the European Union. But I think so. Basically, all the models that you see in Switzerland, for example, this model where you put money into not a fund, a foundation. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean that's a model. You could do that in the whole of the European Union also, plus a lot of other models. And I see the competitive advantage of Austria In particular, we have established in Austria that we can do ICOs, that's legally fine. And we have potentially, if you're, for example, considering a security ICO, we have potentially a much broader market. If you get your capital market prospectus for your security token approved by the Austrian regulator or any other regulator in the European Union, you can passport that to all other member states. So potentially the market that you can address is much broader. And I see this as one of the major advantages. So in terms of classical utility tokens, perhaps not so much, consider going to Switzerland. But in terms of securities, I would recommend staying within the boundaries of the European Union.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Oliver's comments, even if Switzerland has a favorable regulatory environment, you can't issue your token in a vacuum unless you plan on only issuing that token to residents of Switzerland. But that might be a small market that you're trying to access. So what I'm just trying to say is you'll always have to consider the regulatory environment of other jurisdictions in the EU or the US or China or anywhere else.
Okay. Further questions? Yeah.
Okay, I wrote it down, so try to be concise. This is for Brian, and I have a medical tourism business in the U.S., and so I want to be able to offer tokens to my customers that are referring me business and so on and so forth. So, you know, whether they're providing video testimonials or Facebook likes, whatever, and then offer them a token, you know, like on the Waves platform or something. And so I just want to, I have a few questions. So one is, I saw the Howey test, and does it have to meet all four criteria for it to be considered a security, or if it only meets one, then I'm considered a security?
All four have to be met.
Okay, so that's safer. And also,
easy.
are there any states, I understand like New York has specific regulation that I would say like this token is not applicable for anyone in New York State or anyone else?
Right, so there are a couple of states, so just a quick overview of the federalist system in the US. There's US federal law that applies to all 50 states, and then each state has a slight variation of their own state law that applies. When it comes to securities laws, federal law is applicable first and foremost, and states can't really put on extra restrictions in addition to the federal law. That being said, there are certain states, New York, for example, with the BIT license, and Wyoming, who's been developing their own cryptocurrency regulations, that are pretty active in this space. So if it goes beyond the issuing of securities, then you have to take some state law into account.
Okay, and last question. Sorry if it's too American for all of you, but why are they not considered gift cards, basically, these sort of utility tokens where it's, you trade points and they redeem them for, and can I use that as like a decent framework for writing my contract with the customer?
Well, I think gift cards are really, the question is really whether there's an expectation of profits. And with gift cards, and it's the same with tokens at a laundromat or tickets to go ride a roller coaster, there's not really an expectation of profits there. The gift card has a set value, and the people who buy the gift cards aren't buying it with the expectation that they hold on to it and then they trade it later on an exchange or something like that and receive a profit. So I think they're completely different things.
Good. Further questions? Yeah? We can start to repeat them.
Okay, we are talking now about startups that will grow into companies, not about scams or other sort. What's the deal with the location? So you are starting a project, right? I've worked with sites, listing sites, for ICO, right? And when I checked the invoice, they are all in havens like Gibraltar or something like that. Why? I checked some ICOs that when they started, they haven't been registered anywhere. Can you apply the regulations if you're not registered, if you're just making the project? I hope I was...
At least from the US perspective, it doesn't matter where the company is incorporated, so long as it is offering securities in the United States or to US persons, then the jurisdiction is triggered.
Do you have an advantage for not listing the location at the start? Why so many businesses do it?
Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't really fully understand what they need to do.
Dušica, maybe, or Oliver.
I think that apart from regulatory framework, which I think is extremely important thing, there is also a tax legislation, tax framework, which I believe I myself have worked in this Gibraltar, Singapore, Hong Kong. These are the typical jurisdictions with certain tax advantages, particularly if you have, for example, a utility token. If you issue it in Hong Kong, you have 0 VAT, which is different to any other jurisdiction around the world. On the other side, even if you issue it in Europe and you trade it in some other countries, you still have this VAT is not always applicable, and etc. So it really depends on your business model and what you are going to go after. I'm personally against using foundation model for every single thing, because I personally think that's tax evasion scheme if you use it for everything. There are business models that need foundation, and this is good, and they should have it, but there are business models that are profitable, and they shouldn't have the charitable foundation behind it. And there is another thing which I think it's extremely important to introduce when you're looking at ICO, look at separation of money. You want to be sure that your ICO has show you, or at least you can ask it in community, that basically they are going to receive money and how they're going to distribute it. That there is not like money ends up in private wallet, so we are all going for holidays because we had a very tough time about ICO and we're using investors' money. You really want to make sure that that doesn't happen. For me, that is even more important than just where exactly it is issued. But I think that mostly these issuances are driven by tax reasons.
What about, Oliver, maybe?
I mean, just another thing, businesses are doing it all the time, for decades.
Yeah, in the old startup world, let's say, yeah, I'm used to asking people, so who are the founders of the company and which company do these assets belong to? I asked this in one of the previous panels regarding blockchain, and the answer was then you have to think this new world differently. It can belong to everybody, it can be open source, and the business models around it that evolve around it are completely different. So do we need a limited liabilities company for blockchain projects as well, or could anybody just start it, have no impressum, have no legal background at all, and still raise ICO? What do you advise?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. The thing is, if you see an ICO that doesn't even give you imprint information, that's perhaps not even a company, but only a bunch of people. I mean, the thing is, if a bunch of people come together to do an ICO and start a project, they become a company anyways, then it's a civil law company, but still, nevertheless, you would like to know who people are. I mean, I wanted to just quickly answer on the second question that was raised, why exchanges are oftentimes not in the European Union or are in one of these exotic jurisdictions. The thing is, as far as we have thought this through, in order to have an exchange for cryptos in the European Union, you need a commodities exchange license, which actually requires a couple of million euros of equity. And I think that's actually the reason why you don't see a real exchange, meaning that you have a matchmaking process, that you are bringing together automatically purchase and sales orders. There are a couple of other workarounds basically, but I think that's the reason why you find the real exchanges that work like stock exchanges some elsewhere, not in the European Union. And I personally would advise, if you see an ICO and you can't really verify based on the imprint who the people are, stay away from it.
Maybe since we're talking about exchanges, one interesting information that Sergeant told me before we started, I'm not sure whether you mentioned it on the slides, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I think the Waves platform integrates an exchange as well. I've heard so far from current ICOs that if you want to place your tokens on the exchange, you have to pay 40 bitcoins upfront just to be listed, and then a transaction fee from the transactions. And I think with Waves, the exchange is already integrated. Is that also a USP that you can offer? Yes, please, you can add to that.
Hey guys, I'm part of the Waves team, so just to clarify about the DEX. The DEX that is integrated in the Waves client does not require a banking license because it doesn't provide a custodial service because it's decentralized. So the Waves doesn't actually hold your tokens or your funds. It only provides the matching algorithm, which is done centrally by the node. And once the matches are fulfilled, then the funds actually only then they leave your wallet. So in terms of the DEX, what's so great about it is that you don't have to trust a third party to hold your tokens, to hold your funds. The same way it happens with Binance or Bittrex or other exchanges, where you have to first deposit your tokens, and well, if someone hacks into your wallet, they're not responsible for it, basically. So you have to trust.
Quite a few assets that you have on the Waves. Further questions?
So let's say you successfully do an ICO and you raise funds, and then your token starts trading on a exchange such as Bittrex, which allows United States citizens to trade. How are the regulations post-ICO regarding your token sale?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's Section 4 of the Securities Act exempts registration of securities from those who are not issuers, underwriters, or dealers. And so if you're just a common Joe guy who's trading on an exchange and received the token somewhere, then you don't really have to worry about going through and registering with the SEC. Now, the definition of what constitutes an issuer, an underwriter, or a dealer is fairly broad. So there's a chance that you could fall under those definitions, and then you would be subject to the registration requirements. Does that answer your?
So you would be subject as the guy who made the tokens, or as the guy who's trading?
As a trader or as an issuer of token?
So so if you weren't the one who initially sold or issued the tokens, then you would probably be considered an underwriter, or maybe even a dealer. Yep.
Yeah.
Just a general question in terms of regulation. With the GDPR regulation coming up, obviously like the hidden elephant in the room. So for upcoming ICOs, I guess they can probably prepare for it. But for existing ones, how do you think that's the best way to, overcome that? Would they have someone, to come in to actually does the GDPR? Is it something that you've already prepared for your clients that are already launching an ICO?
Yeah, I wished my partner Arthur Stadler was here because he is a GDPR expert. I can only give you some thoughts on the surface of it. Definitely it is something to consider. I think it's more an issue after, so I don't think it's really an issue for the actual sales process. Since, I mean, it's really, on the one side, you don't want to get too much information, but only the one necessary to fulfill a contract. And there you could argue, okay, what's really important to fulfill a contract in terms of when you issue a token, you don't really need much, only the address where your investor would like to receive their tokens. On the other hand, you would like to get as much information as possible, since you want to be able to switch from crypto into fiat at one time in the future. This is sort of a bit of a stretch to go. I don't think this GDPR is an issue for the actual sales process, but only afterwards in terms of when trading starts, or when there are transactions which are visible for everyone to see on the blockchain. This could be an issue. But I don't see it to, I mean, we have not really considered any issues in the current ICO so far. And we would have, since my partner, Arthur Stadler, is expert in this field of law. So not for the ICO.
Further questions? First here.
Hello. If I create a token on Waves platform and I put a sell wall on DEX, and let's say someone from US will buy from DEX, me as a token creator, will I have some problems because I don't have controls of people who will buy from DEX directly? Because it's a decentralized exchange, I don't know.
Right, so if you're issuing tokens, you'd be considered an issuer, and if you have to be mindful of issuing tokens in the United States or to US persons. Once those tokens are already out there and trading on a secondary exchange, the trades on those exchanges from the issuer's perspective are not really your concern. To kind of clarify the previous question, where it does become an issue is if the person who bought the securities from the issuer could be considered either an underwriter or a dealer, meaning an underwriter being a large financial institution that buys them with a view to distribute them later to the market, or a dealer who buys them for themselves as a part of a business in dealing in securities. But in some, once you as the issuer have sold your tokens, they're on the exchange, and then completely unrelated to you, they're being bought and sold by US persons, that's not your problem.
Hello, I'm Marius. I have a question for you actually. If I want to use Waves platform as an immutable database, let's say I want to put my name now on your blockchain. Can I do that, and how?
So at the moment you can only do minor snippets of information. It's basically like comparable to a tweet on Twitter. But there is a data transaction already on the test net about to be launched on the main net in the next couple of days, where you will be able to do much more with actually putting data on the Waves blockchain, including different types of data. So you will be able to say this field is a yes or no value, this field is a number, this field has whatever text. And so yeah, this is so as I said before, it's all developing really quickly. If you look at GitHub, where the development is actually happening, there are contributions from the development team. Every 2 days there's an announcement, actually a meaningful announcement. So yeah, well, I want to put my name, like a small string. You can, yeah, now if you send a transaction, you can attach basically what an equivalent of a tweet to every transaction, which is actually, I mentioned earlier, Coffee Coin. That's actually how they are tracking orders and shipments and stuff like that. They are attaching snippets of textual information to each and every transaction. So I could put a hash of 32 bytes, let's say. To be honest, I don't know exactly how many bytes you can attach, but yes, some 100-something characters or 200 characters or something like that.
Further questions?
And maybe a bit out of this world. What is your experience with monetary authorities? Are they also embarking on this trend of cyber currencies, or do you ever have to do with them, or is that a complete non-issue to your world?
By monetary authorities, do you mean like central banks?
Central banks, yeah, money issuing institutions. What is their stake in the whole game?
Yeah, so in the US, these institutions are looking at the crypto space closely. There's this group within the Treasury Department called FinCEN. It's called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and they are really active in KYC, AML, Know Your Customer, anti-money laundering, and they are establishing requirements for that. And then obviously there's the tax implications. On the regulatory side, it's extremely uncertain. A lot of different regulatory authorities have said that cryptos could be treated in different ways, from property to investment to, yeah. And so it's just, it's really uncertain. Do you
Well, Mr. Novotny from the Austrian National Bank has a very particular approach to cryptocurrencies. I mean, he wants to make certain at every occasion that is offered to him that he thinks this is all scam. How the European Central Bank views it, well, actually, I forgot her name. What's the lady that is controlling the European Central Bank currently? She said that crypto will be the future, basically. So she said this is a technology that we need to monitor closely and look closely at, because these are the new developments. And I think they have understood that. But there's not much else coming from the monetary institutions so far.
I can just confirm that, for example, in Switzerland, usually you would register or at least get negative opinion for FINMA. That's for sure. And I can confirm that FCA UK is very closely looking at it. They're also particularly looking into scams, and they're issuing so-called serious fraudulent warnings if they discover the scam and then the attorney takes over. Then the real criminal investigation starts, etc. So basically, I have dealt with FCA and FINMA, and you do have to do your work.
Oops, sorry, just perhaps to add one additional thing. So if you look at the regulator side, so the Financial Markets Authority in Austria, for example, I mean, they seem rather comfortable. I mean, they have stated a couple of years ago in 2014 that you don't need a banking license to sell cryptos. And I mean, I think they are really, they have a lot to do at the moment, simply because there are also entrepreneurs entering from outside of Austria into Austria, simply because they see regulation is crypto friendly here. They have a lot to do. It's becoming a bit more difficult to talk to them, simply because the response time is increasing. But I have never had the feeling that they sort of want to get rid of cryptocurrencies or blockchain technology. Totally the opposite is the case. They see this as an interesting new form of, a way perhaps, I mean, how to do capital markets issuing in the future, or at least something that we need to investigate and be friendly towards. And I really see that with the Austrian regulator.
But could this slow down the development of the ICOs? Do we have enough of experts? Do we have enough of lawyers, tax advisors, business advisors that can advise this process in case maybe international startups decide to start an ICO according to Austrian law? Do we have enough of experts here?
I mean, we're not the only lawyers anymore who do crypto. I mean, we are really focusing on it, and we try to always stay at the forefront of knowledge. But we're not the only ones. And also, this year again, the last year, we started with a class at the University of Vienna, where we taught crypto law for the first time. And we have repeated that this year in the form of a seminar. And we really try to engage young lawyers also, and to inform them of our legal findings or what we have developed as a legal framework, how to understand cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. And so, and not only we have done this with the University of Vienna, but also there's a crypto economics institute established with the University for Economics of Vienna, where there are also lawyers who are actively researching this new field of law. And I think we have the advantage of being a rather crypto-friendly nation, and I think that's why a couple of other universities too try to have their own classes and their own courses on this new field of law.
VU as well. Yeah, I mean, VU as well. And there is also RIAT, the institute.
Yes.
I believe that Austria is pretty much well set.
Well equipped, okay. Further questions? Yes. So if anybody is thinking of digital fiat money and criticizes crypto money as a scam, can you take this seriously?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that, no.
That's a clear answer. So another question.
Hello. I'm not very good with microphones, so okay. Yeah, first of all, maybe thank you very much for all the presentations and the panel discussion. I'm comparatively new to crypto, and so I'm always eager to learn from experts. I actually don't really have questions. I rather have two comments, and yeah, my question would be then more: did you hear about it, and yeah, what do you think about it? So, has any one of you been last week at the C42 Investment Summit at the Vienna Business School, or no?
No, we've not been there, but I know that. I know the people who organized it, and I know the people behind it. Yeah.
Because just there's one comment I had on because European Union and the European Union regulations were mentioned a couple of times. So there was actually a panel also on the legal regulations and so forth, and there was a talk from the European Union, and there is actually the European Union endorsed by I think the Commission and the Parliament both. They installed a fintech task force specifically on blockchain, and they actually, I'm not sure whether they already issued it, but I think they already agreed on kind of a blockchain resolution, which is supposed to come either this year or rather next year probably. So the bottom line, when I browse through my notes, is that actually they are rather open to ICOs, especially because they see it as investment opportunities for small and medium enterprises. And I think also what they try to do is they really want to acknowledge the utility token as a kind of distinct category, which might be important, especially then also to distinguish it from the securities and so forth. Yeah, so I don't know what the plan exactly is. As I said, either this year or next year was what they told what they said at the panel. So that's one comment. I was interested whether you heard about it and what you think about it. The second is just kind of a general, I don't know, risk disclaimer I want to give maybe, because yeah, I myself I'm new and I'm very much into crypto and I really like it. But still, at the other hand, I think it's very important that we always have this kind of reality check where we are at the moment, also with the blockchain technology in general. And it's still although it's now about 9 years old, I think, since Bitcoin started, it's still a very new technology, and it's still very, very risky, I think. And on this occasion, I just wanted to give a small quotation or paraphrase of William Mugaya, because he was quoted in the first presentation. He was actually the keynote lecturer at the summit last week. And he was also giving quite interesting word of caution, and I just wanted to paraphrase it at this point. So what he said was, when it comes to blockchain, we want to accelerate things so much that we want things now that we won't have before 10 years, actually. Of course, we would need to contextualize this and comment on it, but just that we're really aware when we do these ICO investments and so forth, it's really still, also from the technological side, a very high-risk thing, something like that, yeah.
Any comments to that?
I totally agree with the second comment, but that's always the case with new technology. And as to the first one, let's hope that this will become reality quickly.
Tušica.
Yeah, I would also say that I believe that I've been to some meetings in European Parliament, so there are actually people, they are thinking about blockchain and how it can be of added value to them. It's not far advanced, and these institutions, I don't have a full information how far advanced they are, but I wouldn't say that they're negative. I would actually say that everyone is looking at it and how can be utilized in the best optimum way. And about the other thing, yeah, I would also agree with Oliver. It's always with the new technology. I think that I have a passion for new technologies for a long time. I've been around, I remember .com, and I always believed in technologies, and I remember the world without computers, and I have to say that I'm convinced that blockchain will deliver but I'm looking at it without the hype. I really am aware that not everything out there is going to happen. This is what I said. I personally believe not every business is for the blockchain, and I hope to see the new things like quantum computers and many new things coming. Blockchain is just one technology, and good one.
And
could I just add something?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the first comment, but to the second comment, I completely agree. These investments are highly speculative, and anybody advertising otherwise is a complete fraud.
Very volatile.
And only invest the money, it's what I've been told so often, that you can really miss. So anything that you'd invest in casino, I guess, is something that you can also invest in ICO. Obviously, this is a bit of a joke, what I said, not a real joke, paraphrasing, so to say, but at the bottom line, it is speculative investments, like every startup investment is. Every investor investing in a startup doesn't really know whether it's going to function or not. It can be next Uber or Dropbox or whatever, but it can also go bankrupt after a couple of years.
Fully agree with that, and I would just add a different perspective, even though I fully agree. But I'm a little bit of a dreamer as well, and so I would also encourage everybody to support the projects that seem to have their heart in the right place, and people who are trying to do interesting, different, good, whatever attracts you project. Even if you lose the money, at least it's going to be a fun ride.
But then be prepared.
But always be prepared to lose that money, yes.
And just to add the last thing about it, no one will give you 100 eaters if you send them 5.
Oh God, yes.
No one.
Yes.
So just think about that, any investment in anything in crypto world, like you would think if you're buying stock exchange or going to the shop and buying something, you would really want to understand it, to have it, and no one will give you 100 if you send them 5.
But you have speculations also on the stock markets and in the old fiat world, just the same way.
But this is a little bit more volatile at the moment.
This is more volatile, yes, and because it's more accessible to everybody. But it opens also new investment opportunities. I mean, it was very difficult to invest in real estate. If you find a nice building, let's say Schönbrunn, it might be possible, if it would be privatized, maybe a stupid example, but it might be possible to invest 1,000 euros converted into whatever coin into this building. It's not possible to do it today. We're very, very difficult with complex structures, and these are new asset possibilities.
There is a royal wedding token. I don't know really what it is doing, but I have seen it's out there because I just came from Blockchain Expo. I mean, there's lots of things that you really don't need to have.
Unless you want to sponsor the wedding of royal.
Yeah, but that's different. Maybe you're going to be invited as a guest if you buy enough of them.
Hey, VIP lounge with your video talk.
A gift card.
So let's leave it here. Yeah. I will just repeat and rephrase and correct me if I did not understand it correctly, but I think it's a good question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, many, well, we have like soft caps and hard caps and so on and so forth, and many ICOs want to raise 20, 30 million because they think this is the money necessary to develop the project, but then they raise, I don't know, 10% of it, which is still good, and it's still fine and it still works out. Are these caps totally out of range? Do you need 30, 40 million euros to develop a blockchain, or what is your opinion?
Yeah, I have heard different opinions on that. I'm always trying, when I'm working with the ICOs, to come to some realistic plan, and like I would do with a regular startup, and that we define what the money will be used for. Because I believe that my role as advisor is, first of all, to deliver certain know-how to the entrepreneurs, that they should structure the company and how they should do the things in transparent way. I agree that there is not enough transparency in post-ICO time, and this is something which I'm talking a lot about. I think in one of the rational views how much tokens you need and what are you going to use it for and how you're going to use it and who can sign off. Is it just a box with money out there so anyone can take money, or there is actually 4 or 6I principle introduced, and that you inform the investors about everything. I have seen people just putting thumb in the air numbers. I will not lie to you, I've seen that. But I've also seen people with very serious business plans. What we usually do, we develop the business plan, which we use as a seed document for white paper and many other things, but there is actual numbers and how many people, how many developers, how much office would cost, and all these things. And we always try to have certain charitable element, because I believe the new world is about that as well. And also the liquidity department and reserve, what it is going to be used, what are the risk triggers when you are going to use it. We try to predefine it. I have only met people who work on these things seriously. Maybe that is because I'm also working with similar people who have similar beliefs like me. But I do know that lots of startups, lots of companies and ICOs are quite seriously taking these numbers, but not 100% for sure.
Maybe closing question, because this is still really confusing me sometimes, and I'm not sure whether my track of thoughts is correct. Let's say somebody raises 10, 20 million euros in ICO, and the company uses it very well and develops the business. But does that necessarily increase the value of the token that you invested in? I'm trying to compare it to an IPO. With an IPO, I become an owner of a company that is growing in value if you use this money for the growth of the company, and that, I believe, also increases the value of my stake on that company. Is that the case in an ICO? Is that, or is it completely two different worlds, the way the value of the token is developing and the way the value of the company?
Technically, they're not two completely different worlds. It is, you're just investing in IPO in a company you believe will deliver certain products and services and money flow. In ICO, you're investing directly in product and services, and you believe the company will be monitoring deliverance of that. So you're not investing into the equity. There is room for growth to protect the investors. Definitely, this is why I'm saying ICOs are shaping up. But I think that also you could always participate in income participation. It was something that people were doing. You wouldn't own the company in this was like structured product in capital markets as well, I think. So there are many other forms that were used before as well. The only thing which I believe that in the essence, we are talking about the business. If business is done well, and there's many usage around the world, and you know how they're going to deliver it, and I'm not talking about only the open source. We make it so people use it, so we don't basically make the money on it. So it depends on scarcity of token or not. I'm talking about these tokenized business models. Then we are talking about more or less similar model like IPO.
So it's all about the trust as well. Like we trust the value of gold, we trust the value of other. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly. I think the answer really depends on what the rights are that are attached to the token. I mean, in the traditional capital markets setting, a traditional equity security would entail the rights to voting rights, first of all, and rights to dividends. If it's a debt security, then you'd have the right to the principal plus interest. I mean, it just depends on what the rights are that are attached to the token. Sometimes you may not have many or any, and you're just dependent on the market value increasing. In other cases, it could be different.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I just had one thing. We haven't touched smart contracts at all tonight, basically, and that's a topic definitely for one of our upcoming meetups. But it goes right back to the basics of blockchain. What is a blockchain? We need to kind of keep that in mind constantly. It's a decentralized, self-sovereign, basically technology. And with smart contracts on top, you enable automated organizations, so to say, or so instead of hiring a bank or an escrow agent, you set up a smart contract which serves as an escrow. Everybody who can read the programming language of this smart contract can actually look for themselves and make sure that they will not be defrauded. Because the smart contracts, if written correctly, are immutable and they will execute no matter what, given conditions that they depend on, and so on and so forth. But we have honestly exceeded all of my wildest expectations for tonight. I personally believe this was an absolutely amazing event. I'm so grateful to quite a few people. Let me start with Impact Hub. They've been very good hosts to us. Waves, Waves team have sponsored the rental of the room and the refreshments and a couple of other things. Sasha has joined us from Amsterdam. He works with the Waves team and helps organize and lead and present at various events throughout Europe. A great guy. It's a pleasure to be working with you. And of course, our speakers, presenters, panelists. Dušica, a good friend of mine of many years. Thank you so much for being here, but also the gentlemen who have come without being good friends with me for a number of years. Because this topic was interesting enough for them and they wanted to present their thoughts to you. I'm immensely grateful to all of you. And then last but not least, I can't believe it. It's 25th of April and we are boiling in this room. I can't imagine what July and August have in store for us. So thank you so much for staying for 3 hours and participating in the discussion tonight.